Greetings, everyone. This is Dave Fortson, COO of Regen Network Development. I am happy to present to you another episode of the Greenproofing series, our opportunity to explore the world of sustainability and impact at the professional level and hear more from the people in the boardrooms, in the companies, and on the ground actually doing the work. Today, I'm super excited to have a guest on from Open Forest Protocol. We're going to bring on Diego Chaparro. Diego is the partnerships manager in Latin America, which is a hugely important area of the world for the global movement around sustainability impact. And I am happy to bring on Diego. Welcome. Diego, where are you right now in the world, and how are you doing?
Hi, David. Thanks for the invitation to join this amazing event. So I'm based in Bogota, Colombia, and that's the geographical location that I am joining you guys from.
Wonderful. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. So I think, as I mentioned, one of the first things I like to lead off with is, as a sustainability professional, like, how did you arrive here? Was there something in your life or professionally or personally or historically that really that was the turning point for you to see yourself as setting up a career in sustainability as a professional? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, great question. Though a little bit difficult to answer because it's funny because my background was mainly on technology, right? And I ended up in this beautiful space 4 years ago when I had the opportunity to have a chat with one friend of mine who I used to work with at one of these huge tech providers, well, IBM, right? So because I was working on an entrepreneurial project, which was kind of a marketplace for joining or putting together supply and demand. But it was about renewable energies. And at the moment, I had no idea about anything that was related to renewable energies. So I had to reach out to this friend of mine, who is the founder of one of the greatest or the largest project developers right here in Colombia. So that he could enlighten me about or tell me more about renewable energies. And the guy ended up offering me a position in his company, right? So at the moment, I didn't know much about this space, but once I started working on nature and getting myself into the project development space, getting to know everything about nature-based solutions, the voluntary carbon market, the carbon credits, indigenous people, local communities, fighting for climate change. Amen. The whole thing started to have a lot of sense to me, right? And it was also the opportunity to put everything together. And when I say that, based on my professional background, so I had the chance to prove myself in terms of putting together technology and the climate space, right? I didn't know that when you're talking about, for example, an intangible asset such as a carbon credit, right? So it is very difficult to actually understand the concept behind it, right? And I knew that I was going to be able to put technology and the climate space all together, mixing it with blockchain technology, and talking about encryption, talking about tokenizing, uh, all these concepts that eventually will become like an essential part of leveraging technology as part of bringing trust and transparency to the carbon market, right? So well, it has been a beautiful journey. It has been a quite enlightening journey, full of knowledge, full of new experiences. And I think one of the most beautiful things about this experience, sorry, is having the chance to go down there and start talking and knowing about local communities, indigenous peoples,
Yes.
what all those groups are needing at the moment in terms of financial resources. Um, because those are actually the people that are in charge of taking care of our own natural resources, right? Especially in the whole global south.
Yes.
So and that was one of the most beautiful experiences that I had the chance to go through. Especially, for example, I'm going to bring like a short story to the conversation right here in Colombia, in the southwest region of Colombia, in the departments of Nariño and Cauca. There are lots of indigenous people and local communities who are really involved in the in taking care of a huge natural ecosystem, right? Um, and being able to talk with them, identifying their needs. I mean, it was super enlightening and beautiful experience.
Wonderful. Well, and we're going to tug on that string just a little bit here in a minute, but help people understand, as you talked about, which I love this story, being able to be on the ground, but as well as, with the communities doing the repair, but also being able to be fluent and understand how to leverage cutting edge technology in the spirit of how do we verify impact, how do we bring more revenue or more resources to the communities on the ground in a way that is transparent and auditable. So in that theme, I mean, open forest protocol, and again, we have a lot of respect for you here at Regen, being in a similar space, sits at that edge of using some of the most cutting edge technology, using blockchain, being able to, have developed your own digital carbon standard for forest restoration. Can you speak a little bit more about the thesis of change for open forest protocol? Like, how are you different maybe than normal standards? Is it just how you execute is different? Is it more of the more of the standard itself? Is it more how you relate to the communities, or is it all of the above? Just any a brief description of how OFP shows up in quite a unique space in an area in a time where people are hungry to really believe that the impact is possible on the ground. Even if I'm in the global north, that I want to know that I can invest in an asset like a carbon credit and really know that the impact is happening anywhere in the world.
Yeah, sure. Really interesting question. Yeah, I think there is a cutting edge proposal or added value or unique selling point about OFP in terms of transparency, in terms of bringing new opportunities for those local and indigenous people in the global south. And as you said, it has to do with the backbone of its technology, how it was built, how it was conceived from the beginning. And I think there is a huge differentiator from the rest. If you ask me, in my personal, I think that was one of the reasons why I was motivated or hooked by the opportunity to be part of that team. And I'm gonna talk about the processes of monitoring, reporting, and verification. Right,
Great.
you for the ones who do not know, well, in order to be able to issue carbon credits, you have to go through the process of going to the ground and start measuring trees, monitoring every now and then how are trees growing so that you can somehow quantify the amount of carbon dioxide that is being sequestered by those trees. And you have to also build a report, and you have to also bring a third party so that this third party can audit every piece of work that you are doing, right? And that is kind of cumbersome. I mean, that takes a lot of time in order to accomplish all those processes on the ground, and that obviously costs money, right? So you have to pay for all those processes in order to be able to issue carbon credits, right? um, So in order for that to be profitable at some point, I mean, you obviously have to take care of the environment, of the people, but the whole thing has to be sustainable at some point, right? There has to be some monetary outcome out of the whole operation. So you need larger land sizes in order to issue those carbon credits, so that at the end, once you sell those credits, you can have some profit, and you can actually take back to communities and to indigenous people, and return all those profits back to them, right? So in that sense, the other standards are built so that you have to pay for all those processes, and the opportunities, I think, are narrower, or more targeted to big corporations, or
Sure.
at least for companies that have the resources, the private resources, to be able to pay for those costs. So that is not inclusive at all, right? And talking about inclusivity, for example, in the global south, I'm going to talk about my country, but I'm pretty sure that the same situation is taking place in other countries in Latam. 74% of the land right here in Colombia is owned by small landowners,
Wow.
right?
I had no idea.
And those small landowners, um, they are not taking part of the voluntary carbon market, right? There are some projects in which you cluster many of those landowners in order to have like a bigger piece of land, and thus the ability to create a carbon project out of the
Sure.
cluster, right? But if you talk in a more granular sense, that is not going to be, or there's not going to be a possibility to issue carbon credits out of a small piece of land,
Sure.
right?
But together,
So
if you bring them all
OFP,
together. Yeah.
exactly. So OFP created this digital monitoring, measuring, reporting, verification process, leveraging geospatial technology, leveraging blockchain technology, and so you get to go through the whole process by free, right?
Mm.
And once you are able to go this process by free, then you will be able to give the opportunity to all those small landowners to be part of the voluntary carbon market, right? So I think that's a really huge differentiator, and a huge added value, and unique selling point, and unique proposal for OFP to be disruptive, right? And to bring more possibilities to all those small landowners that have been somehow put aside, um, or yeah, that they haven't
Yeah.
been able to be part of the whole voluntary carbon market because of this, right? So I think that that's kind of the most cutting edge technology, the added value that OFP is bringing to the voluntary carbon market, the possibility to be inclusive, and to give the opportunity to all those small landowners to be part of the voluntary carbon market, right? I think that is the main advantage of
That's
that.
a big deal. So, I mean, helping lower the barriers to the entry to the voluntary carbon markets is, it sounds like, a superpower of OFP. And kind of curious. I mean, you know, Latin America, in the global South more broadly, is home to so many of the most important global ecological cycles, right? The hydrologic cycle, being able to, as the Amazon is often called, the lungs of the planet.
Yeah.
So many of our major, animal species, are anchored in the wildlands in the global South. But it often, the global South has been left out of the equation, right? When it comes to helping develop their own version of what does it look like to protect forests in a way that is that contemplates the impact on the human beings in the global south, right? They're often smallholder land farmers or land stewards, and they have, as you've mentioned, often been outside of the decision-making bodies who are determining what conservation looks like. Can you speak a little bit more about, for those who were not part of the global south or understand what it looks like to work in Latin America, what are some of the unique challenges and opportunities that you see for companies who want to invest in the land stewards in the global south? What should they be aware of? How should they be contemplating approaching making an investment in the land stewards on these most important ecological systems? Any thoughts as somebody who works in Latin America?
Yeah, I think the word inclusivity, or as you said, taking them into account, considering what they have to say, and the cultural aspect of those groups. I mean, indigenous peoples, local communities are bringing or have been taking care of those valuable natural resources for ages, right? And they have their ways, they have their religious beliefs, they have a really great connection with the land. Um, and it is thanks to them that I would say that we have the opportunity nowadays to at least have part of that beautiful ecosystem, which is the Amazon, in somehow preserved and taken care of, right? Every time that we talk about um, bringing financial resources to be able to develop biodiversity projects, carbon projects, restoring land, the common aspect is always going to be the people, right?
Yes.
So if we ever think about investing in a project, or creating or developing a project that will have a huge impact in nature, the people, the local communities, uh, do have to be part of the decision taking process, right? So we cannot leave them out of the whole process.
Can you speak
Either
a little
because,
bit more about what that looks like? Like, as somebody's working on the ground, and it sounds like you've
yeah.
been in these communities, like,
Oh yeah, for sure.
like what does it look like to actually be in a community, like, and have the conversation and consider their cultural needs, their own governance needs, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, even, I'm sure there's a whole different approach that you need to think of. Like, do you have like some principles or some like lessons that we should be contemplating as we consider, frankly, moving even more capital into the global south?
Yeah.
What are some of the values or principles that we should be centering our engagement around, in your perspective?
Yeah. Well, my perspective was, once I had the opportunity to be down there on the ground and having conversations with them, and taking a more general view of the reality, I think there's a very important aspect, right? There's a lot of poverty. There is violence. I mean, there are like illegal groups, and there are illegal activities that also put in danger natural resources. There is often lots of tree cutting, fires, illicit crops. I mean, that's a reality, and I think that is taking place in most local communities and in most towns, cities, and municipalities, right here in the global south and in Latin American countries. So the fact that we can offer them another alternative to receive financial resources that doesn't have to do anything with illicit crops, with drugs, with cutting trees, that's gonna benefit all of us, and most of all, it's going to benefit those local communities and indigenous people, right? And they do not know about those mechanisms to bring additional resources to their communities. I mean, their reality is just about the need of bringing food to their families, right?
Sure.
So whatever they hear or whatever they are offered in terms of being able to bring the breakfast, the lunch, and dinner to their little kids, they are going to accept it, right? And if it is from the guerrilla groups or the illicit groups that are offering them the opportunity to gain some money by engaging with illegal activities, I mean, those people are poor people and are in huge need of actually feeding their families, right? So if we do not put our efforts in creating additional mechanisms to actually get those people away from illicit activities with mechanisms such as biodiversity credits,
Mhm.
carbon project development, I mean, those people are never going to get out of those activities. That is a very sad aspect. That is one thing that I had the opportunity to live while I was on the ground. So yeah, I think that's how reality looks like in Latin America countries, and most of all in those geographical locations.
Wonderful. Well, as we get tied toward the end of our interview here, I would love to hear, and maybe in this theme, but as you're working in Latin America and helping bring new revenue streams for ecological conservation and repair to the communities on the ground, do you
Yeah.
have any things that you can share that are bringing you hope right now? Like what is like when you wake up and you've worked on a project, what is the thing that you hold on to in a time when it feels like, right, it's so overwhelming, the amount
Yeah.
of like pessimism and bad news that we get? Tell us something that is like you're just like, this is something that we can all look at and be really excited about, and that we should.
Yeah, sure, David. I think this kind of initiatives, the one that you are actually developing by interviewing me and hopefully many other stakeholders in the space, bringing the knowledge, educating the world about these realities, right? These events that we are living, that kind of gives me hope, because that means that the world is also putting the eyes on those communities, on the Amazon forest, on restoring nature. So that is one of the things that gives me hope. Um, Having visibility, this is such a beautiful initiative that you guys are working on, because that eventually will bring knowledge and awareness, well, let's say to the global north, well, about
Sure.
what's taking place right here. And hopefully, yeah, the people that are listening to this interview will get motivated, and we'll be able to all work together in order to bring more opportunities to local communities and indigenous people that are the ones that are taking care of our nature, right? So that is one of the things that gives me hope. And talking in a more particular sense, for example, last week I was in the biodiversity week
Oh
that
yes.
took place right here in Cali, Colombia, right? So after the COP16, it is good to see that the whole biodiversity market, the whole carbon credit market, is gaining even more visibility, right? And there are many events around the world. Well, not only this biodiversity week. I mean, the COP 17 that will eventually take place, the COP 30, many events organized around the world in order to bring more funding to nature projects, right? That is also one thing that gives me hope. I mean, there is no more talking about sustainability or nature as I don't know, like a second priority, right?
Yeah. Right.
There's urgency. So every time that you see the content that is being created on LinkedIn, for example, about nature, climate change, I think I can perceive a sense of urgency when it comes to taking action towards that, right? So that is also bringing me hope, and the sense of urgency in the world, well,
Love it.
to tackling all those issues, right? Yeah, climate change um, is essential, right? It's vital. It means life. I mean, if we do not take care of our whole environment, I mean, who else is going to take care of that, right?
Well, and then tying up here, I mean, I just really am grateful for your work in these communities on the ground who are doing the hard work of stewarding our natural resources that we're all dependent on, regardless of whether you're in the global north or global south. So, in the spirit of hope, bringing more attention to these communities, thank you again for Open Forest Protocol. For yourself as a professional, and very nice to have you here on the Green Proofing series. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Debbie, for having me.
Pleasure. All right, that's it. We're tying out our latest episode of Green Proofing series. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.